Top 10 Epic Battles in Warhammer 40K History. 10. The Battle of Tallarn. Tallarn is a harsh desert planet located in the Segmentum Tempestus and is the homeworld of the famous Tallarn Desert Raiders regiments of the Astra Militarum. It was first discovered in the 29th millennium and was classified as a verdant agri-world. However, during the Horus Heresy in the early 31st millennium, the Iron Warriors Traitor Legion virus bombed the planet from space, turning it into an inhospitable desert. The survivors emerged from their underground bunkers to stop the Iron Warriors' invasion, and the Imperial forces arrived to reinforce them. Despite the futility of fighting over a destroyed planet, the Imperial forces fought back against the Traitor Legion. The Iron Warriors' motivation to attack the world was beyond their mere appetite for destruction, for Tallarn was home to a potent chaos artifact. As the poisoned environment made it impossible for infantry to operate outside of protective shelter, the only available option for battle was armored tank warfare. The largest tank battle in human history erupted on the surface of Tallarn, involving some 10 million armored vehicles. By the end of the battle, the Iron Warriors were defeated, and the wreckage of over 1 million tanks littered the sands. Around 20 Terran years later, the Tallarn Desert Raiders regiments of the Imperial Guard were formed, specialized in desert fighting and highly mobile armored warfare, adept at ambushing enemy forces in the desert. 9. The Battle of Prospero, also known as the First Battle of Prospero, was a major engagement that took place during the Horus Heresy in M31. It was a sanctioned Imperial military action against the Thousand Sons Legion's homeworld of Prospero, ordered as a punishment for the Thousand Sons' violation of the Emperor of Mankind's edicts against the use of psychic powers and sorcery made at the Council of Nicaea. The Imperial forces who carried out the attack were led by the Space Wolves Legion, with support from elements of the Legio Custodes and the Sisters of Silence. However, the War Master Horus secretly intervened and convinced Lemon Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves, to seek Magnus the Red's death rather than his capture. This went against the Emperor's original orders, which had been to capture Magnus and bring him to Terra for judgment. The Space Wolves then attacked Prospero with the goal of eliminating Magnus the Red and punishing the Thousand Sons for their use of sorcery. The battle was fierce, with the Thousand Sons mounting a significant defense and inflicting heavy casualties on the Space Wolves. Eventually, the Space Wolves managed to breach the Thousand Sons' defenses and fight their way to Magnus Citadel. 8. The Battle of Macragge was a significant event for the Ultramarines chapter of Space Marines, in which they confronted and defeated the first invasion of the Milky Way galaxy by the Tyranids of Hive Fleet Behemoth in 745. M41, bringing an end to the First Tyrannic War. This victory led to the introduction of the Tyrannic War veterans and several changes in the chapter's tactical organization and doctrine to fight this new threat. The invasion of Hive Fleet Behemoth against the chapter's homeworld of Macragge was the conflict that stood above all others. Upon learning of the threat, Marneus Calgar ordered to improve the already formidable defenses of Macragge, including the fleet of warships and the planet's orbital defense stations. The Tyranids attacked Macragge, and Calgar combined his ground forces into 3 mighty armies to oppose the massive Tyranid threat. In a final climactic battle on Cold Steel Ridge, the Ultramarines' rearguard was brutalized, and Calgar was gravely wounded. Calgar withdrew to the orbiting battle barge Octavius, taking command of the fleet, and led a series of daring attacks to strike isolated vessels as they spread out to invade Macragge. The Ultramarines fought relentlessly and destroyed many Tyranid vessels, but many more yet remained. In the end, the Ultramarines emerged victorious, having saved their homeworld from certain destruction. 7. The First War for Armageddon occurred in 444 M41 and was a battle between the forces of Chaos and the defenders of the Imperium of Man over the hive world of Armageddon in the Segmentum Solar. The Chaos forces were led by Angron, the former Primarch and Demon Prince who sought to unify his scattered world eaters into a formidable force to invade the Imperium. Just like they had done during the Horus Heresy, the conflict began in a region of space called the Eye of Terror, where Chaos forces resided. The Chaos forces, which were usually at odds with each other, occasionally united to launch a joint attack against their common enemy, the Imperium of Man. The Space Hulk Devourer of Stars arrived at a demon world controlled by the Demon Prince and former Primarch Angron and his World Eaters Traitor Legion, triggering the unity of the powers of Chaos. The First War for Armageddon ended with the defeat of the forces of Chaos, but at a great cost. The world was left devastated and the Imperial defenders suffered heavy losses. Angron believed in his victory too soon, and his premature celebration allowed the Imperium to launch a counterattack that forced the Chaos forces to retreat. Angron was banished to the Warp. The aftermath of the war also resulted in a conflict between the Inquisition and the Space Wolves chapter of Space Marines over the sterilization of the surviving population of Armageddon. This conflict eventually resulted in an orbital battle over the Space Wolves' homeworld of Fenris, but a compromise compromise was eventually reached between the Inquisition and the Space Wolves that restored harmony between the Imperium's factions. 6. The Battle of Helsreach. The Orcs were attacking the Imperial fortress world of Helsreach. It was dynamic and dramatic as the defenders of Helsreach fought against the Orcs in a series of desperate confrontations, culminating in a final showdown between the Orc warlord and the Space Marine captain, Grimeldus. The portrayal of the Orcs as cunning and tactical adversaries, rather than just brute force, was something special. The events were chronicled in the novel Helsreach by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, which has become quite popular. The story of Helsreach inspired an animated series on YouTube named also Helsreach, created by Richard Boylan and his team. The series consists of 11 episodes and has become incredibly known among Warhammer fans. 5. The Battle for Rynn's World. The Orc warlord Snagrod united the different greenskin factions to launch the largest Orc forces, which invaded the Imperial agri-world of Badlanding. The only significant point of resistance was the capital city, Krudgerport, where Imperial Guard regiments commanded by Commissar House Balger fiercely defended it but ultimately lost. Snagrod boasted that his next target would be Rynn's World, leading Chapter Master Pedro Cantor to send the 3rd Company to Badlanding to stall the Orcs. The Battle of Krudgerport proved to be a tragic defeat for the Crimson Fist, losing 56 Space Marines out of 84. The survivors brought intelligence back to Rynn's World, where Chapter Master Cantor ordered the immediate recall of all chapter companies fighting away from Rynn's World, mobilized the planetary defense force known as the Rynsguard, and prepared for invasion. Snagrod attacked Rynn's World, causing devastation unseen since the hive world of Armageddon. The Orc invasion was shockingly fast, sweeping away the planet's orbital defenses and warships in a matter of hours. The planet was on the brink of annihilation, with only a small number of surviving Space Marines and the vastly outnumbered Rynnite planetary defense force to defend it. In the end, only 16 Crimson Fists survived the attack, including Chapter Master Pedro Cantor and Captain Alessio Cortez, who held out against the Orc siege of New Rynn City. The valiant Rynsguard Airwing fought a constant tide of Orc air assaults and defended the skies over New Rynn City. 4. The Siege of Vraks was a major campaign fought between the forces of the Imperium of Men and the heretical forces of Chaos on the planet Vraks, which lasted for more than 17 years of brutal warfare. Vraks was a heavily fortified planet that had long been a center of the Imperium's war machine, producing vast quantities of arms and ammunition. However, the planetary governor, Gerber, had turned to the worship of Chaos and used his position and the planet's defenses to rebel against the Imperium. The Imperial forces, under the command of Lord Commander Militant Slato, launched a massive assault on the planet to quell the rebellion. However, the forces of Chaos, led by the notorious Chaos Lord Jufer, fiercely resisted the Imperial invasion and turned Vraks into a hellish battleground. The campaign was marked by brutal trench warfare, savage close-quarters combat, and the deployment of massive weapons of war, including Titans and super heavy tanks. The fighting was prolonged and brutal, and the losses on both sides were enormous. In the end, the Imperial forces were able to prevail and finally bring Vraks back into the fold of the Imperium, but not without losses. The campaign had taken a terrible toll on both sides, and the planet was left devastated and scarred by the long years of fighting. 3. The Battle of the Fang. The Battle of the Fang was a conflict between the Thousand Sons Chaos Space Marines and the Space Wolves chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, which ended with the Space Wolves successfully defending their homeworld, Fenris. The Thousand Sons had conducted destructive raids on several worlds neighboring Fenris to taunt the Space Wolves, and when the Space Wolves finally discovered the Thousand Sons on the world of Gengava, they launched a great hunt for the traitors. However, the Thousand Sons had set a trap by preparing to invade and level Fenris while the Space Wolves were away. The Thousand Sons were also interested in preventing the Space Wolves from creating successor chapters, which would reproduce their gene seed without its inherent flaws. The Thousand Sons fleet attacked Fenris's orbital defenses, followed by a landing of ground forces. The defenders of Fenris fought back, but they were outnumbered, and the Fang was besieged. Magnus the Red led the invasion of Fenris with the goal of destroying Thar Hrauder's Apothecarian and all of his research and prototypes. Magnus fought his way through the Fang Thane, forcing Hrauder to order a retreat of his warriors to the Annulus. Mort Kerkborn and his Carols volunteered to hold off the advancing Thousand Sons to cover the retreat, while the Dreadnoughts engaged Magnus in close combat. Magnus eventually overcame and slew the rearguard, Greylock, Odain Sturmjart, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, and 2 surviving Wolf Guard, determined to engage the Demon Primarch, raced through the Fang to find Magnus. Thar Hrauder set up the defense of the Annulus but handed command over to Bloodclaw Ogrim Rieger Vrafson as he realized his gene seed work was in danger. Magnus destroyed everything related to Hrauder's project of creating viable Space Wolf successor gene seed, and in a doomed close combat, Hrauder was killed. Before Magnus could return to his forces, he was confronted by Greylock, Sturmjart, Bjorn, and the Wolf Guard, who eagerly engaged him in battle. 2. The Battle for CADIA. CADIA is a planet that is part of the Imperium of Man and was attacked by the forces of Chaos during the 13th Black Crusade, a massive invasion launched by the Chaos warlord Abaddon the Despoiler. The forces of Chaos that attacked CADIA were made up of various factions, including Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Demons, and Traitor Guard. The battle for CADIA was a major event in the lore of Warhammer 40,000 and had significant consequences for the galaxy. CADIA was primarily defended by the Cadian shock troops, also known as the Cadian regiments, which were a highly trained and well-equipped Imperial Guard regiment composed of soldiers from the planet CADIA. Other Imperial forces were also present, such as Space Marines, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Inquisition, and various other Imperial factions who had stationed themselves on CADIA for one reason or another. Additionally, the Living Saint Celestine arrived on CADIA to aid in the defense against the Chaos forces. The destruction of CADIA marked a major event in the lore of Warhammer 40,000, as it was the first time in history that a key world in the Imperium of Man had been destroyed. Abaddon the Despoiler fail-safe plan involving the Blackstone Fortress Will of Eternity. The fortress struck CADIA with such force that the planet was ripped apart and swallowed by the Eye of Terror, leaving behind a catastrophic event that led to the loss of countless lives and the destruction of many cities, fortresses, and landmarks on the planet. The event also had far-reaching consequences for the Imperium, as it led to the formation of the Great Rift and the fracturing of the galaxy. 1. The Siege of Terra. The Siege of Terra marked the second-to-last battle of the Horus Heresy, taking place on the homeworld of humanity, Terra. The conflict between the Imperium of Man and the Chaos forces not only decided the outcome of the Horus Heresy, but also the fate of humanity. The War Master of the Imperium, Horus, led the Chaos armies against the Loyalists, who had suffered significant losses at the Drop Site Massacre. Horus had crippled 3 Loyalist Space Marine legions, with 1 Primarch dead and 2 others severely wounded or missing. The massive war was fought both in the skies and on the ground of the Imperial Palace on Terra. It was one of the largest and most intense in the history of the Imperium, involving millions of combatants and spanning multiple solar weeks. The Loyalist Primarch Sanguinius led a boarding party in an attempt to confront Horus and end the rebellion once and for all. However, Sanguinius was met by Horus himself, who had been corrupted by the powers of Chaos and was now an immensely powerful being. The two engaged in a brutal battle, with Sanguinius falling in combat. The Emperor then arrived on the Vengeful Spirit. The Emperor and Horus engaged in a titanic duel that lasted for days. The Emperor's actions ultimately resulted in the defeat of Horus and the traitor legions, securing the Imperium's survival and the end of the heresy. But he paid a huge price. In some sources, it is suggested that the duel between Horus and the Emperor during the Battle of Terra lasted for days. This information comes from various sources in the Warhammer 40,000 lore, including novels, rulebooks, and other media. The Battle of Terra is considered one of the most significant events in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Its aftermath led to significant changes in the Imperium, including the creation of the High Lords of Terra and the Imperial Cult. This part of the lore has been explored in various Horus Heresy novels and other media, including the Siege of Terra series, which continues the story and its aftermath. The Emperor was mortally wounded and placed on the Golden Throne, a life-sustaining device. It was the Custodian Guard and the Adeptus Mechanicus who constructed and installed the Golden Throne. The Emperor's consciousness is sustained by the psychic energy of 1,000 psychers who are sacrificed daily to keep him alive, and he is kept in a state of perpetual agony. While on the Golden Throne, the Emperor is essentially a psychic beacon that helps to keep the Astronomicon, the Imperium's faster-than-light navigation system, functioning. His body has decayed and he is no longer able to speak or communicate directly, but he is still able to project his will through the power of the warp. The Emperor is believed to be the most powerful psyker in the galaxy, and his continued existence is vital to the Imperium's survival. In conclusion, the Warhammer 40K universe is filled with epic and legendary battles, each with its unique place in the lore and history of the Imperium. From the pivotal Battle of Terra, which saw the end of the Horus Heresy, to the fall of CADIA, which resulted in the opening of the Cadian Gate, and the beginning of a new era of war and chaos. These conflicts have shaped the destiny of the Imperium and its peoples. These battles have proven time and time again that in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
If you enjoy my content and you like to show your support, please check out the links in the video description below. I share my meaningful educational content on sex, fitness, health, nutrition, and more on my OnlyFans page. I offer movie reviews upon request on my Patreon page, and I also accept casual support through PayPal. Thank you for considering supporting me and my work.
mouths of the Black Templars and will cast your carcasses from these holy walls.